Who makes the best four-wheel drive system in the industry? And what makes a four-wheel drive system good? Well, in this video, we're gonna find out.
Gentle throttle applications? So we're really not seeing any kind of traction control intervention at all. Pretty heavy into the throttle now. This is gonna have to force the brakes to actuate the wheels that are spinning and accelerate. Yeah, very impressive.
Over the past 6 years, I have run hundreds of vehicles through the TFL slip test. Now, the purpose of this test is to see how a four-wheel drive system reacts in a controlled environment to a really tough situation. So we get various wheels stuck in on purpose in these rollers to see if the car or truck can get unstuck. There is a lot more that goes into the off-road capability of a vehicle than just how its four-wheel drive system performs, but it certainly is a very important element. There are three primary elements of the TFL slip test. The first is the two-wheel test. So we get either the front wheels stuck in the rollers or the rear wheel stuck in the rollers to see how the four-wheel drive engagement is, or in some cases the all-wheel drive engagement is to get us unstuck. Then there is the diagonal test, so it's opposite ends of the cars. Think left front, right rear stuck. Now this is very common off-road if you're going through some pits or some trenches, but also imagine if you're driving up a sloped and snowy driveway, the diagonal slip test is very important. And then we come to the hardest test of them all, the three-wheel test. Now this is more extreme than you typically find in the real world, but we like to push the boundaries of these all-wheel drive and four-wheel drive systems to see how they work in very extreme situations. Not all 4x4 systems are built the same. In fact, I would argue there's a pretty distinct difference between four-wheel drive and all-wheel drive vehicles. Now, you could spend a whole video arguing this point, but I'm just gonna make my argument and let you decide whether or not I've done a good job or not. But in my mind, a four-wheel drive system has a low range, a distinct low range set of gears, and an all-wheel drive system is usually a full-time single speed setup. These full-time all-wheel drive systems are typically built for lighter duty use cases. Think inclement weather, snow, slush, rain, things like that, but they can also be very functional out on a trail, and there are certain systems that definitely are more capable than others. Now, while most of these light-duty soft-roaders are more built for bad weather than Moab, Utah, there are some exceptions that excel in just about every type of scenario. The first I'm talking about is the Ford Bronco Sport, and certain trims of the Ford Bronco Sport can be had with a very advanced twin-clutch rear differential setup. Now, this setup does an amazing job of getting this vehicle unstuck in the very challenging three-wheel slip test. It's a very effective system, especially paired with the 2-liter turbocharged 4-cylinder EcoBoost and the 8-speed automatic.
Starting out in normal mode, nothing fancy on, no lockers, no all-wheel drive locks, nothing like that. Let's see what happens. In the normal mode, got some wheel spin. Okay, that was impressive. I gotta say, that's a really aggressive rear end, and that's what makes this particular Bronco Sport so special, that twin clutch rear end.
It is worth noting though, that not all Bronco Sports have this system. It's very important. For example, a Badlands will have the system, whereas a base model Big Bend will have a 3-cylinder without that twin clutch rear end. You have to get that twin clutch rear end if you want to take your Bronco into some more extreme four-wheel drive situations. But if you do, it will amaze you because it is an incredible setup for a soft-roader. Another system that has proved time and time again to be incredible in the TFL slip test is the Honda iVTM4 system. Now, iVTM4 stands for Intelligent Variable Torque Management version 4, and this is a system found in the Honda Passport, the Honda Pilot, and the Honda Ridgeline. Now, the iVTM4, much like the Ford system we talked about earlier, does an incredible job at sending torque where it needs to go, when it needs to go there. And the most impressive application of this are in the Trail Sport versions like the Honda Passport Trail Sport, especially when paired with the all-terrain tires. It's incredible where a Passport Trail Sport will go.
We're on to the three-wheel slip test. This is where we separate the off-roaders from the strictly on-roaders. So both rear wheels are stuck, left front is stuck, only the front right is on the ground. That's the one that's gonna need to turn to get us unstuck. Here we go, come on Honda. Let's see what we got. Oh, wow, 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 excellent result. Nice gentle throttle application like you would do if you were stuck in the snow. We got that kind of jerking of the traction control as it started to engage, and then off we went. Really good result.
But the cool thing about the iBTM4 system is it comes in every Passport, it comes in every Pilot, it comes in every Ridgeline, at least the current ones, regardless of whether or not you get the on-road ones or the off-road ones. It's just an amazing system. Even though it doesn't have a low range, it does an amazing job out in the dirt. It's got pretty good gearing in first gear. It's just a great system. But
pulled us right off. I mean, it's been almost unstoppable on the rollers. There's no scenario except for maybe all four stuck, which you're never going to find, where we got unstuck there. That was awesome. Really impressive car.
But it's very important, worth noting, that Honda systems vary greatly if you don't get a Pilot, a Passport, or a Ridgeline. So if you get an HRV or a CRV, which we'll talk about later, they do not perform nearly as well as those vehicles.
I'm really starting to get into watches, and one of the coolest I've seen all year is the Original Grain Ford Motor Company collaboration. You gotta check this thing out. I don't need to tell you about the long history of Ford Motor Company and some of the legendary trucks and four-wheel drives and cars that they've built throughout the years. And this Original Grain Ford collaboration comes in this beautifully crafted wooden box. When I pop this open, we're going to reveal the watch. And look how nice this unit is. If you're a fan of older Fords like we are, be it our Model T or Andre's Ford F600, then you're going to be very familiar with a lot of the materials that Original Grain makes this watch out of. So we're going to find real wood, steel, and leather throughout the collection. This watch features an all-natural oak wood inlay, and look at that Ford tailgate design on the center of the watch dial. Pretty cool stuff. Now, Original Grain has been making unique watches for 12 years now, using everything from reclaimed wood from guitars and whiskey bourbon barrels to floorboards from the Grand Ole Opry stage. With Father's Day just around the corner, this Original Grain watch is a great gift for the Ford lover in your family, and this one is just one of 6 in this collection. Want to save over $150 on the Ford collection of watches? Just click the link in the description, originalgrain.com/TFL, and your exclusive discount will be automatically applied. Original Grain is running a $100 off Father's Day sale right now, and by using the link, you'll get an extra $50 off on top of that.
Another system I've been impressed with is the Subaru Wilderness system. Now, because I don't have a ton of experience in all the Wilderness products, I'm specifically talking about the Forester Wilderness, which is another vehicle that does a great job of sending power where it needs to go, when it needs to go there, and coupled with the Wilderness specifically, with the better crawl ratio than the standard Subarus, these are impressive vehicles. Other Subarus are okay, but with the CVT, sometimes they really struggle with low speed torque delivery, but the Wilderness Forester I've tested seem to do very well with that. Now, keeping in the theme of soft roaders, not Moab going Wranglers, but just soft roaders, Jeep does have a couple of interesting systems. Now, I've tested the Compass, it's okay, but it's nowhere near as impressive as the Bronco Sport that it competes with. But we gotta talk about the Grand Cherokee. Now, the Grand Cherokee, just like the Ford, can be had with a number of different all-wheel drive systems, and I would argue four-wheel drive systems, because you can get a Grand Cherokee with a low range, and if you do get one with one of the more advanced four-wheel drive systems with the low range, it is a very impressive vehicle. Now, this is an interesting one because you could argue it's not a crossover with an all-wheel drive system, it's more of a traditional off-roader, but I would argue a Grand Cherokee with a low range and the proper set of tires can do a lot of impressive things off-road.
This is the ultimate test of an all-wheel drive system. We're gonna go back in high range, just like that. We're in the auto mode like you drive it every single day. Let's see what happens. Come on, right front. Gotta get some grip, buddy. Okay, well, it's thinking about it, but we're clearly not going anywhere. So let's try sand and mud. Let's see if we see any different performance in sand and mud. Yeah, much better.
Not all all-wheel drive systems are built the same in these unibody crossovers. Some perform a lot better than others, and some of the disappointments include some of the Toyota hybrid systems. Now, Toyota does an interesting thing with their hybrid systems. They don't have a physical drive shaft connecting the engine in the front to the differential in the rear. Instead, they've got the hybrid system for the front axle, and then they have an electric motor only for the rear axle. And sometimes that electric motor doesn't have what it takes in really tough situation. So for example, the older Prius all-wheel drive with a 7 horsepower rear electric motor was a very light duty all-wheel drive system, for being kind. But even the RAV4 hybrid kind of struggles with torque delivery with that rear electric motor. It just doesn't have the oomph. And also the new Camry is actually worse on the slip test than the old all-wheel drive mechanical Camry. Now granted, these are not off-roaders, right? No one's taking a Camry off-road, but I have been a little disappointed in their slip test performance, which I also figure translates to relatively disappointing performance in bad snowy environments. Now there is an argument to be made, and I've talked to some engineers who have made the argument that the slip test is not representative of real-world situations. When are you going to find a situation where you have literally no traction at all on opposite ends of the car? They would describe this a 0 mu, which is a coefficient of traction, or in some cases a negative mu situation because that wheel is stuck in that little groove. That's not realistic, and I appreciate that argument. I think that it's very valid. I'll let you guys make the decision, but I would make the pitch that we're going for extreme here, and if it passes the slip test, it'll probably get you up some pretty challenging terrain. There have been some other disappointments beyond just some of the Toyota hybrid systems. Some Toyota hybrid systems, by the way, work really well, like in the Crown, but some other disappointments: CR-V and HR-V, not very good at distributing torque. Same thing with the new Maverick all-wheel drive hybrid system that we have in our long-term Maverick. Look, it's perfectly adequate for most folks, but if you want to take it into some more rugged terrain, you probably want the gasoline Maverick, especially with that trimmer package. When it comes to dedicated four-wheel drives, and I'm talking about vehicles with a low-range transfer case built for regular off-road use, well, the best four-wheel drive system is going to be one that has locking differentials. Front and rear locking differentials will pass the slip test every time and will get you through the hardest terrain. So let's take the locking diffs out of the equation and talk about some other traction aids that these manufacturers incorporate, like off-road cruise control setups, traction control programming, because that's when we really start to see the differences between various hardcore four-wheel drives. Toyota is able to accomplish some amazing things with their advanced traction control systems. I'm talking A-TRAC, I'm talking crawl control. Some of the Toyota systems are very, very impressive. Both of these systems are great, both A-TRAC and crawl control, at determining wheel spin and sending wheel speed where it needs to go when it needs to get there. It's amazing, honestly. It's amazing what Toyota is able to do with crawl control and with A-TRAC. It's so amazing that in most applications, I would say you don't even need a locking differential in some of the upper trims. Now, it's great to have all-terrain tires and recovery points that the off-road trims give you, but A-TRAC is a very, very impressive system that's been used for years. Even the non-off-road trims of Toyota trucks, for example, this red Toyota Tacoma, that wasn't a Tier D off-road or a Pro, works very well off-road because in low range, you've got that advanced traction control system that will respond, brake spinning wheels, and get you where you need to go. And in my opinion, crawl control is the best in the business at automatic feet off the pedal systems. It's just immediate, responsive, and incredibly functional. Crawl control is the gold standard of off-road cruise control systems. The only downside to some of the Toyota four-wheel drives, it's very rare to find them with a full-time setup. So for example, Ford, which we'll talk about next, has a 4-auto system across pretty much their whole four-wheel drive lineup. But unless you get specific trims of Toyota trucks and SUVs that have a full-time system, like the 4Runner Limited, then you have to constantly be going between 2 high and 4 high in the winter, which is a little bit frustrating in my opinion. The full-time systems are impressive. They're cool. They have a Torsen limited slip diff in the center of the vehicle, which is awesome, right? But you can't get those with like a Pro or a Tier D off-road, so they're not really meant for severe off-road use. Ford has an excellent four-wheel drive system across their trucks and their hardcore four-wheel drive, the Ford Bronco. Now, one advantage, like I talked about a little bit earlier, is Ford is very willing to sell you a four-wheel drive auto setting, which is a two-wheel drive until it senses grip and then engages four-wheel drive. It works well, it's fairly simple, and I really do like that. And Ford also has the single best locker engagement in the industry. You push the button and the locker turns on. No fighting, no faff, no flashing lights, no back and forth and turning and, praying to the heavens. The Ford will just engage lockers when you click them on. They are very, very effective. Now, the drawbacks with some Fords is they do have an off-road cruise control like Toyota called trail control. It's not nearly as effective. And then we're going to use trail control, which I would love to use in 4-low, but it won't let me do it unless I'm in high range if I want to use this mud and rut program. It's kind of a
little confusing. In the neutral, let the vehicle settle. Gonna set the trail control to 2 miles an hour in high range, remember, because we wanted that mud and rut program. Okay, come on. See if you can figure it out. This is worse than doing it with my foot. And you don't have as much control in low range. So this is all the truck is trying to figure out what to do. Okay, that's not having it. What if we go out of mud and ruts into the sand? Oh, okay, that was good.
I find it to be pretty herky-jerky. I find the throttle control to be very on and off, and I find the wheel speed modulation to not be nearly as good as the Toyota system. But apart from that, especially if you get one with locking diffs, they are incredibly capable four-wheel drive systems. Now we got to talk about the toughest four-letter word on wheels, or at least that's what Jeep would have said in the 1970s. So Jeep, right? We're specifically the Wrangler. Now the Wrangler, not as flashy as the Ford or the Toyota systems. They do have off-road cruise control called Select Speed Control. It's fine. It's somewhere between the Ford and the Toyota systems. But what Jeep does really well is just their basic brake lock differential system is what they call it, where they slow down the spinning wheels to send wheel speed to the other side of the vehicle. BLD is so effective. And it's so effective on the Wrangler that for most people, you don't need to get the Rubicon or even the Willys with the rear locker. A Sport with a good set of tires will get you 99% of the places you need to go. Brake lock differentials are awesome on the Wranglers. They just work incredibly well. Plus you have solid axles, which we're not really talking about suspension in this video, but you get a lot of articulation. So the Wrangler four-wheel drive system is a little rudimentary, but very, very good when it comes to actually getting you down the trail. Another system that's kind of more on the basic side of things, but also works really well and is often overlooked is the Nissan four-wheel drive. Now this is probably the least flashy in the industry, and you really do want to get a Pro 4X in the Frontier or Armada if you are going to do a lot of frequent off-roading, because I do find the Nissan systems do rely fairly heavily on locking diffs to get you through a lot of things. Their traction programming is a little basic and a little slow to respond, but they're just basic, effective, durable systems that are going to get you ultimately where you need to go. So don't completely overlook the Nissan systems. They're pretty good. Now let's talk Chevrolet. Actually, let's talk GM in general, because Chevrolet and GMC both have top trim off-road trucks. We're talking ZR2 AT4X with locking diffs that are incredible. But in their midline trucks, like the Trail Boss, you get a traction aid called the G80. Now the G80 is an automatic locking rear differential, and I don't mean a limited slip with clutches. I mean it's a full-on locker that uses a variation in wheel speed to actually engage the locking paws. They work really well. I know a lot of people don't like G80s because they are kind of alarming when they engage. You end up with wheel spin, wheel spin, wheel spin, and then bang, up you go toward the heavens. But it's functional, right? It does do what it needs to do. It is very antiquated in its actuation, but I like them because it's a positive engagement. You don't get any computer thinking. You don't need airlines or electronics to make them work. They just do their thing. And those are the major off-road brands. So who does the best four-wheel drive system? Okay, this is a brand we haven't talked about. It's a brand that it's probably going to get some hate, but I have to say, from my testing, when you take lockers out of the equation, when you just look at the four-wheel drive programming and ease of use and just overall across the whole spectrum, how does it work? In my opinion, the best system is the Land Rover setup, specifically in the Defender. I know I'm going to get some hate about this. Once again, we're not talking about will it get me up a level 10 trail. We're talking about the full gamut of uses. The Land Rover four-wheel drive system, the full-time system in the Defender is the best. It's one of the pioneers. Land Rover pioneered terrain response over 2 decades ago, and it is incredibly quick to respond, and it has big variations from mud and ruts to snow to rock crawl. It really changes the character of the vehicle and what that vehicle will do without lockers. The immediacy at how that traction control responds is like driving a vehicle that has locked diffs. Not always, but across most situations.
Oh, so good. Man, people really don't give Land Rover a lot of credit.
It is so impressive. So it's my favorite full-time system, period. You don't have to engage four-wheel drive. It's always there. It's always active. And it's just so impressive in snow, in rocks, in sand, what have you. The Defender system is very, very good. It's not as good as a triple locked vehicle, but it is pretty close for a relatively road-going, comfortable vehicle. Let me know what you guys think in the comment section below. I'm sure you'll have some comments. Let me know what I forgot. I've got a ton of slip tests archived away. Check them out over at alltfl.com, and we'll see you next time.